I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
If you have a crazy theory about something that happened that differs from the public story,
it's one small step for man.
You're called a conspiracy nut. But what if you find out that the story that you have is the real story and the public story is the lie? Well, it's still a conspiracy. But are you a nut?
I can't even believe I'm here talking about this. It's proving every conspiracy theory anybody has ever developed.
In 1958, the U.S. entered the space race, and it really began in earnest in 1961 with Alan Shepard's suborbital flight. And I remember as a 5-year-old kid, I was glued to my television. I watched the launch. I watched the splashdown. I took notes on little pieces of paper. I vividly remember writing, "He's okay," when he came out of the capsule and waved. Thing is, we have the technology today to launch rockets safely with people on the top of them, but back then, they were blowing up on the pad. We were using intercontinental ballistic missile platforms. The Agena and the Redstone were designed to deliver nuclear weapons to the Soviet Union, not carry a man into space. And there were so many explosions that it wasn't safe for people to fly. So somebody came up with the idea of, let's beat the Russians at their own game. They were faking it too. And they came up with Operation Paper Moon.
It's a worthwhile subject that we're addressing here, but it's been long in the thinking of the necessity of such a moment as this. I may look like just your normal householder, but I have had a major responsibility in the past in connection with the moon landing. This was a project that took many years and many people, intelligent, skilled, knowledgeable people, to put it together, to make it apparent that we did have a moon landing.
The incredible year of '68. Yeah, '68 was definitely a turning point in American history. Summer, right after the Summer of Love, right? All these huge events happen. Martin Luther King gets killed, RFK gets killed. I wonder if any of them were ever alive.
So on July 20th, when we landed on the moon, and on July 21st, when we first walked on the moon, I still say we, it was a lie. And when I ran to the store and got the newspaper, it was a lie. And when I built the models when I was a kid, it was a lie. And my world was shattered because my heroes weren't heroes. They were actors. They were liars. And I took that anger, that grief, and I researched. And I found people who worked on Paper Moon, and since it had been declassified, they were able to talk about it.
That the landing took a lot of work and convincing. And frankly, we did a remarkable job, wouldn't you agree? At this point, the fact it's been declassified is a disappointment. We thought we really did it forevermore, but not anymore. It's out there.
It was thousands of engineers and writers and script writers and photographers and set builders and film directors. They even said that Stanley Kubrick did it. It wasn't Stanley Kubrick. It was Hiram Wright, but he died a couple of years ago, so I couldn't interview him. But I found people who were willing to talk about their parts in Paper Moon.
So that involved finding engineers, PR people, film, even studio props people, all of whom now have an opportunity, and maybe it would be even a relief for them, in fact, to tell the facts of what really was going on.
Don't get me wrong, these people are heroes. They got us out of the dark place that our country was in. We were in the middle of the Vietnam War. There were race riots tearing up our cities. They were helping tell a story that saved our country from an abyss. But for people like me who believed, that lie was hard to take. But I don't hold any malice towards the people who did it. This is their story. The patriots who created Paper Moon, the engineers, the scientists, the artists, telling you, now that it's been declassified, what they did. And now you won't be a conspiracy nut. You'll be knowing the conspiracy truth of Operation Paper Moon.
You know, and when we look back on this, and you know, when they allowed us to start talking, of course, some of us got in touch again over the years. And one thing that, you know, I can say personally, and I think I reflect the views of my colleagues, is that we really did a good job. And it was a necessary job. And we think overall it was the morally correct thing to do. And it's probably, of all the things most of us have done in our life, we've done nothing more difficult or done anything any better.
Well, I was kind of just pulled in because I knew someone. I done a little bit of movie work, nothing you've ever heard of, but my brother knew someone who was working for the government, and somehow they got my name, and before you know it, I was called into a room, someone had me sign a paper, said, here's what we're doing, you want in on this? And hey, it paid.
I got into it the way most people get into it. Somebody made a suggestion. I graduated in communications, and you know how many jobs there are in communications, whatever that means. And a friend said, would I like to do something for my country? So I didn't want to go to Vietnam. It seemed like a good way to do something for my country and not be involved in Vietnam. So I was taken, interestingly enough, to Washington, and it was a long time before they explained to me that I would be working with NASA.
U.S. government, it seemed you could bill absolutely anything. If you had a plausible excuse, they'd find some way to get it for you.
Well, my dad worked for NASA, and I didn't know exactly what he did there. I knew he was involved with all these things going on, but you know, your dad goes off to work. I think he took us in a couple of times and showed us around the offices. There was all huge computers and people working on all of this scientific stuff, and we didn't really know what was going on. He would take us into his office, and I just thought he was doing what everybody else was doing. There was papers all over the office. But you know, when you're a kid, your eye level is about at the knee, and so you most interesting things are things that nobody else pays attention to except for a kid. So I didn't really know what was going on above the desk. When I found out later, boy, that was quite a shock.
Anyway, they approached me and said, would you be willing to make a space outfit for a man on the moon?
Now, this was the early days of computer science. We didn't get computer science degrees. You had a degree in math, and you would that entitled you to program a computer because there was no computer science program around. So I came there with a background in math, looking forward to doing really precise numerical analysis and orbital calculations, and how can we manage to hit the moon precisely as it's moving and we're moving, and imprecisions and fuel. It turned out that was irrelevant. I was doing embedded programming, blinking lights and flipping switches, and not even real embedded programming. The thing we needed to do was Hollywood. It was just make it look like science. It was, you know, it was all spinning tapes and blinking lights. It was frustrating.
So one day he called me up and said, "Hey, you want to get on a nice project or a neat project? Good money, of course." And I said, "Sure, talk to me about it."
They explained I would be doing primarily public relations and administrative work. They explained that there was a national security element that I would have to be very cognizant of. Made me take all kinds of oaths and sign all kinds of papers.
Just a standard top secret, ultra top secret clearance.
Finally, they told me I'd be working with NASA, and when I said, you know, communications isn't rocket science, I thought that was a great joke, but they didn't laugh. They just told me that I'd be handling a lot of the administrative end, and I'd be responsible for some of the media. Had I known what that was getting me into, I might have had more second thoughts, but...
Remember, back then, getting the clearance involved that 5-page list and 3 columns and 2-point type of organizations. Are you know, or have you ever been a member of any of the following organizations? And you had to go through that entire list and certify that you had not been a member of any of those organizations. I remember doing that.
What I was a glorified press secretary or something that was going to explain to the media, or try not to explain to the media what was going on.
We had to be sure that we kept it secret and tangible and knowledgeable in our base, or it never would have worked. It just wouldn't have come about.
As you know what those reporters are like, they stick their nose in everywhere. And they don't just want the story, they want the backstory. I'd like to give them a backstory. They nearly blew it for us any number of times.
Especially the most trusted voice in the news at that time was Walter Cronkite. And he had to be kept back in the newsroom where he was safely behind the window and couldn't get a close look. He would very likely have blown a whistle on us if he'd seen what was happening. It would have been terribly embarrassing.
Yeah, the press people were all over us all the time. It was as if we were always watching our backs, because they not only focused on us, they focused on people we were in contact with. So, for instance, the lab where we were making the moon model for the shot, they penetrated that and they found out we were making a moon model. So now all of a sudden we have to make a backstory for a backstory, and we had to come up with some idea of why we were making that moon model, and we did something about lunar landers or simulated models, etc. But it was necessitated because they discovered the model. So then we had to hide a second model in a second studio somewhere else so that they didn't find out what we were really building the model for.
We build this big, enormous sound stage, tried to simulate an entire lunar vista, all the equipment, everything would look great, and someone would come up with a reason why someone was about to investigate the building. We'd have to tear down our sound stages again, move it, pack it up somewhere else. We did most of our work in Nevada. Everyone knows you can hide anything in Area 51.
You know, basically what you start out with is paper mache. That's kind of the basic background things where people aren't going to be walking, of course. And balsa wood. Balsa wood is a nice, solid material, light, but it still has some structure to it. You then have to use, to get the texture to it, basically use plaster of Paris. Standard plaster of Paris that you use for plastering on walls kind of stuff. And it allows you to shape it and push it around. And it's set so it looks good and it's solid. What it actually looked like, what we did was basically pull out the telescopes and take a look at the moon. Went did some basic research. There was no web back then, so you couldn't look up on the web and things like that. My friend who knew about my models put me on this guy called Kruger, who had done some drawings of the moon. Obviously, we kind of had to match what was in telescopes because that's what people thought of as the moon surface. So I didn't really have to get very detailed or very different, but just had to make it look like if you pull up a real high-powered telescope, what would it look like? I had to make the moon look like that. But it didn't really have to be all that close, but just close enough that Joe Schmo on the street would believe it.
And of course, we were there in the middle of the desert, and we had to deal with that damned American flag. No matter what we did, no matter how much starch we put on the thing, it insisted on flapping in even the slightest breeze, so there we were, shutting down every bit of ventilation in the soundstage. It was summer, it was Nevada, it was so stifling we were pouring down gallons of water every hour. Some of the worst days of my life, but, well, the results were good, so I guess it was all worth it.
Okay, here's another thing I was upset about, all right? The special effects guys got a budget, all right? And then, they were saying that Playtex, NASA was saying, Playtex was going to be making the outfits. Well, they didn't give me a budget.
At the time we were doing this, computers were very primitive and filled whole rooms. And you certainly weren't going to put them on your spacecraft. You didn't have the power, you didn't have the space, you didn't have space for the...
Certainly didn't have the space, because I would never have even built a thing that big.
So the solution to this is not to put the computer on the spacecraft.
They just kept adding things and wanting more things.
It was also a little bit delicate. It would take normal waving around, but if you actually put it on a rocket and shot it into space, it would have disintegrated.
I mean, you couldn't set up a device that would look like a spacecraft without people knowing that industry and being familiar with the technology of it and the capabilities.
When the astronaut would flip the switch, the computer out in the next room could see the switch turn and blink the appropriate lights. We had to be predictable about that so that someone watching it would see that when this particular switch turned, the appropriate lights turned on, and roughly the same lights would have to turn on the next time, or else it would look non-sensible.
I got brought in because this is a project that had to come off. It had to pass muster with the public.
Oh, this was hard.
One of the difficulties from the outset was, once this concept was there, that there were hundreds, if not maybe even thousands of people that would have wanted to be involved. And any time you met with one and said, well, this is what the challenge is, this is what we're doing, that would generate a whole plethora of other persons.
We did not just have one script writer, and these guys all would come up with their ideas. And the terrible thing about it was, you would be trying to pick among two or three of them that were plausible. And whichever one you picked, of course, you had a lot of ego involved. These guys had put a lot of work into developing their scripts and actually getting them to submerge their own idea as to what would be the ideal storyline and work together on a common one was a management problem that required incredible people skills. And I can't mention to whom, but I was able to delegate part of that one.
I remember learning about Galileo and his experiments, dropping two objects of different weights and finding out that they actually hit the ground at the same time. And I don't know if the other kids in my class really cared about that, but for me that was mind-blowing. And I would come home and I think I spoke for like 2 straight nights at dinner talking about the experiment and I was thinking of like different, could you drop a truck and a feather and would they both land at the same time? And my father was laughing along with us.
For example, on that point, we had a situation where there was apparently a teenage boy who had become fascinated by the Galileo experiment of dropping the rock and the feather in a non-atmosphere, and they should, of course, land at the same time because of the air current slowing it down. So his father got this idea, and for peace at the home side, I guess probably because Dad had steered him towards Galileo or whatever, he pushed that idea nonstop. And it was one of those things that just And, it had a sort of whimsical moment to it. And it's the kind of thing that if you're up there, people were saying, why not? How often do you get to go to the moon with a feather and a rock?
Well, I guess that idea found its way into the space program too, didn't it? But I just thought it was all a coincidence. I had no idea.
I remember the biggest problem we had. Some guy high up in government, I don't recall who, came to us and said that the school kids knew about some experiments of everything would fall at the same speeds, Galileo, the Tower of Pisa, the stuff, and that we had to have a hammer and a feather dropping together, prove that there was no atmosphere, prove that it was 1/6 gravity. It was just insane. The idea of this was to keep it easy, things that we didn't have to work quite so hard to fake. But it's politics. They didn't give me a choice, so I had to figure out how to make it work.
I'm going to show you. Okay, alrighty. White painter pants, okay? The jacket, a hoodie. This right here pulled right up. Now, of course, we stuffed it. I mean, we didn't stuff it. I mean, I just had, I said to the guys, you wear a lot of long underwear, about, 8 pairs of long underwear, and that kind of puffed it out. And all these, dials here. I used jar lids, painted them, and this, like the box right here that was like the communication thing, transistor radio, sideways, painted. Okay, and here was the biggest challenge. The mask, the helmet thing. I really, really thought a long time about that, and I found a big, clear, plastic fishbowl, right? Cut it in half, glued it to the hoodie, worked perfectly. Oh, and the equipment on the back was a dress box that I just covered with material. Now, American flag, one of the kids, right there.
We got real clever. I don't recall who it was came up with the idea. I wish I could take credit for it, but it wasn't me. What we did was we just hung the hammer and the feather in air. Simple wire work, no trouble there. And then we took our entire sound stage, mounted it on hydraulics, and pushed it upwards at the right speed. And getting the impact right, it took us a few takes, but once we got it right, that just really sold the whole thing. It was amazing.
And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that?
The whole time he was just figuring out where it was going to fit into his screenplay.
Now, I really worked, I thought, very hard on this to make it look slick and make it look space-like. Because, the Russians had a lot of straps. I mean, too many straps. But I thought I did a terrific job. And you know what I got for it? You want to see? Take a look at this. That's what I got. Well, you know where they can put this.
So why did I get into this? It wasn't actually for the money. When I was in high school, the Russians put Sputnik in the sky. And that created an incredible angst in the U.S. The Russians had got there first. We felt like they would continue to get ahead.
One of the difficulties or challenges, you might say, when we initiated this came as a result of what we understood the Russians to be advertising, that they were sending up animals, dogs, into space, when we knew in fact, they were not. That was just balderdash, you might say. So then you think, well, what about could we do? Well, the United States said that it was sending up, let's see, what was it, monkeys, I think. We didn't. We didn't.
Well, we're always competing against the Russians, and, well, we used to laugh at how bad some of their special effects were. I don't know how anyone believed that that was actually something they'd launched and was in orbit.
Ну, как плохому танцору уже яйца мешают. Я тебя много целую и обнимаю. Над бабьим яром памятников нет. Крутой огрев, как грубое надгробие. Мне страшно, мне сегодня.
So when you know that fact, which I was sort of privy to through an odd combination of circumstances, we thought, a group of us, why not have a fake moon race? We could do that better than the Russians.
У меня есть большая советский словарь, сельскохозяйственный и достопримечательности. Я тебя целую, целую и обнимаю.
We couldn't let the Russians get away with, their fake Sputnik, their fake Laika, whatever the dog's name was, and Yuri Gagarin, who was more of a playboy than a cosmonaut. I mean, their footage wasn't as good as ours. And we were proud of that. We won the fake wars. And I think that says something about American technology.
It seemed to me, at least at the time, that the best way to do it was to provide us with a sense of accomplishment, and to give us something that we believed in, that we could then later, if we had to, live up to. And rather than waiting until we could actually put a man on the moon and bring him back safely to Earth, by creating the illusion, I hoped that we would be able to instill a kind of national optimism that would put us in a position that we could eventually catch up with what we had promised.
Yeah, and our intent wasn't to pull the wool over the eyes. Our intent was to do something for America.
About a year ago, I went through a period of really terrible anger. It was tearing out all the flowers in my wife's flower garden. She couldn't understand why, but I had to take it out on something. And the anger, I believe, was directed at my father. And I'm not sure that was fair.
When they removed the ban against us talking and said those of us who were willing to could come forward, actually it was certainly I and the others that I've talked to began reminiscing about the project and what we had done. And frankly, almost all of us are still really proud of the kind of work we put in, the job we did, the ability to control it throughout the whole process, and for years afterwards. I mean, up until right now, not a word of this has ever leaked out.
If you think about it, we built a story from whole cloth that captivated the whole world for years, 4 or 5, 6 years. They can't do that anymore. I mean, it's impossible to do that anymore.
When you think about it, people believe this, right? We did a fantastic job. And so did I, all right?
Country needed a boost like that at that time. And it may have all been a fake, but we really gave the country the boost it needed.
Yeah, I agree. I think we did a really good job. We accomplished the mission. we did what we set out to do. We got America doing it first and getting it out there to people thinking that this can be done. And when you think of things that can be done, people go off and do it. And we did a real good job.
Yes, we really did. We did a great job.
You know, it was a lot of work. Half the time I didn't think that we'd pull off anything at all convincing. But I saw the footage on TV. I look at the footage again now. And it's damn good. I think we really pulled off something impressive.
I made a believable spacesuit. They couldn't have done it without me.
My father was a success. He was a sincere success at what he did, which was foisting the biggest lie upon the world that has ever been seen. Got to give him some credit for that.
We brought together talent and knowledge and created this absolutely fantastic myth, all for the well-being of our country. Really, it was very patriotic. We saw it that way.
We're proud of it on a number of levels. I mean, we're proud of it because it was an incredibly complex job that really required a tremendous amount of work and effort, and we did it successfully. And we also think that the goal and what we did really helped the United States, improved our position in the world. We beat the Russians in the propaganda race. And we think, frankly, the world is better off because we did.
That only happens every century or so when you get that many people, that many brains together to accomplish that much. And we really didn't take advantage of it as well as we could have, I think.
There are many things came out of the science program over time that were not fake at all. Teflon is really there, and freeze-dried ice cream is totally real. Little play acting is maybe the medicine we needed.
А вот я бреду. До сих пор я тебя целую.
I'm picturing someone's going to believe this.
That's it. Like I said, we're going to troll for a few minutes, and the people who are cool are going to immediately go, "Well, of course, it's bull, right?" But
yeah, but it actually sounds sort of believable.
It does, doesn't it?
And I had a pretty wild imagination at the time. I still do, but I try to keep that under control with medication.
I've been making costumes for those geese you have in your yard.
You know, I'll ask you leading questions that are just invite a storm of BS and just BS till you run dry, and then we'll come up with more. Okay.
I did Arbor Day.
You did a really good job of kind of puzzle bewilderment. I loved the bit about the mathematician. You know, that was really good.
I now make costumes for animals. Well, live animals.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome.
I've done,
What's my name?
Don't worry about it. We'll come up with one later.
I've done a Darth Vader for a guinea pig.
Everybody we're interviewing, we're just sitting here going, I wish I wrote this.
This has been a delightful experience for us because we're just pushing people and just BS, just beautiful BS just comes out, and it's really believable. But again, we all wind up sitting here and having a brief boggle and thinking, if this really was fake, it would be probably harder than doing it.
A guy had a pet elephant. It wasn't a real big one. It was a little. This was I know you're not allowed to have an elephant.
And it wasn't about fooling people. It was really doing a public service.
Yeah, and our intent wasn't to pull the wool over the eyes. Our intent was to do something for America.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
I mean, that's probably the closing line for the movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was wonderful.
Do I get a bonus?
Yes.
We will double
your pay.
And I made this Harry Potter with the glasses.
So what actually flew as the computational device on the landers was this Pickett slide rule, and this is the computation that they had on board.
Somebody asked me to make a costume for a hermit crab.
Contrast this with a computation that we actually had in the simulation and model building department, which was very, very substantially more powerful.
Bigger is always better.
I'm still trying to be creative, you know. But they really did me. They did me bad, sons of bitches.
I think I'm on my 10th psychiatrist now that we discovered what the story really was. We think we can make some significant progress.
The hermit crab.
The hermit crab was great.
This morning, I was doing dishes.
That was real?
No,
okay.
None of this is.
No, okay.
None of this is.
I love the bit about the 10th psychiatrist. I don't know if we're going to use that, but that's really awesome. I mean, the outtakes from this would be good too.
Yeah. Is there going to be a gotcha at the end, or
no?
Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you liked the movie, please subscribe to our channel and visit the website for more information. Thank you again.